Hi everyone, welcome to GM Orange's channel. In this video, we'll be discussing how to choose your lines against 1e4 for black. There are two approaches in chess. One is the aggressive approach and the other one, solid or positional approach. Why is it important to choose the correct opening? Um, there are two kinds of players. Some players are aggressive, some players like to play more solid or simple positions. In the initial years, when you are becoming a amateur to intermediate level player or intermediate to advanced level player, it's important to stay close to the strengths, your strengths, the kind of positions that you like to play, that's coming to you naturally. If you are staying with such openings, obviously you will have better results. Some players who are aggressive, and if they play only like solid positions, they might not be able to use their fullest abilities, their strengths to the fullest extent. So it's better to choose the openings at least in the initial years, so that you can basically use your basically you can capitalize your strength to the maximum. Let's see what are the options that black players have after 1e4. I think all reasonable moves with c6 c5, d6 d5, e6 e5, knight c6, knight f6, g6 b6. These are all the options that black players have played extensively. I don't want to really talk about h6 or a6. Among them, let's start with the solid approach. e4, e5 certainly leads into more solid positions, but again, it can also go into wild complications as well as the game progresses. Like in this case, f4, we can't expect a safe position for black. You have to go into complications. But usually, no matter what approach that black players take, white usually has the choice to choose between more solid or positional approach. White basically decides that. But nevertheless, black can also, up to some extent, choose his style of play. Like e4, e5 in this sense, obviously the main line is knight f3, knight c6. Bishop c4 is the Italian and bishop b5 is the Relepos, which are all like usually solid for black, but at the same time, when the time is right, the position can become more complicated. But one thing, you can't expect uh, a big attack on your king, like say in the dragon or Sicilian Nadov kind of structures. At least to begin with, you'll be able to complete your development without much difficulties, and you can basically look for a good middle game position. Obviously, the game can become more complicated after that, and it can uh, go into wild complications after that. But what I'm talking about is, at least in the initial stage of the game, like you'll be able to complete your development without much difficulties in the first 10-15 moves, and maybe like in the later part of the game, it can become more complicated. Apart from this, Karakon usually has a reputation of being one of the most solid approaches against 1e4. In this case, we see a structure arising like this. White wishes to go into more complications. He can choose lines with e5. And other lines like knight d2 or e takes d5. In this case, knight d2 leads into this specific pawn structure, which we'll see in the Scandinavian and Alakan defense as well. We see this specific structure. So they all belong to one family. White has 4 pawns on the queen side and 3 pawns on the king side. Black has 4 pawns on the king side and 3 pawns on the queen side. This is, again, black can look for a solid position with reasonable development without much difficulty in the early stage of the game. And since we spoke about Karakon, we'll also briefly look into the Scandinavian. Here, usually black loses some valuable time with this queen in the center, which can come under attack. But in the longer run, it looks like it's completely fine. So again, we see similar pawn formation like in the Karakon. Black players usually have the same structure. So this one extra tempo that white has got with precise play, white can look for a slight advantage, but in many occasions it doesn't usually matter, and black gets a reasonable solid position. And the Alakane defense also leads into very similar structure in this case. I mean, white players can also look for c4 and go into more aggressive lines, but there are some lines where we see again very similar structure like in the Karakon and the Scandinavian. Same pawn formation here as well, so that's why they all belong to one family. And one more approach with French. French is usually an aggressive opening, but when they start with, this is called the Rubinstein system in the French defense. Again, we see the same pawn formation, same structure, which is usually considered to be quite solid for black. So these are the approaches that black players can take if they wish to keep the game into solid and safe positions, rather than going into like very aggressive lines to begin with. But when I say aggressive lines, that doesn't mean no tactics or anything. Obviously, you have to be aware of tactical possibilities every single move. That's all there, but at least it doesn't go into wild complications. That's the only thing. Now, e4, c5. Okay, we can say that mostly all the forms of Sicilian, starting with Naidov, Dragon, or Sveshnikov, or anything, usually goes into wild complications. We can't say, you know what, I want to play a positional game after playing e4, c5. Usually it's not. Obviously, at some point in the middle game, the game can turn into different approach as well. But usually Sicilian means you can expect wild complications. But again, white can dictate the terms. If he wishes to play the Alapin, again, this kind of structures usually lead into more positional battle rather than attacking positions. So Sicilian is for players who wish to go into complicated positions. Likewise, French, the main lines usually go into complicated positions. And apart from that, players have also played d6, g6, which is the Pirc defense and the modern defense. Usually these lines also like lead into more complicated positions. Mainly these are like used as a surprise weapon in the top level at least. I mean, there are many players who regularly play this in their repertoire. It's also there. But again, these are like definitely complicated approaches for black. And finally, lines with b6, knight c6. I think, I mean, nothing much about these lines. Again, these lines are like more of surprise lines. Knight c6 maybe up to some extent they can transpose into the main lines with e4, e5. Or if they wish to go into a separate main lines with the Nimzo itself, then they can go with structures like this. But usually we can conclude it this way. So e4, c5, d6, g6, e6. These are the options that black players can play to go into more aggressive positions, or if they wish to keep the game into more solid grounds, then they should continue with e5, c6, and if e6, they have to go into the Rubinstein system. D5, the Scandinavian, or knight f6, the Alakane defense. So these are the approaches that black players have, and depending on your style and your choice of play, the kind of positions that you would like to play, you can choose the lines. And as I said earlier, stay close to your strength, at least to begin with in your initial years. And in the later part, once you develop your game, you should definitely be able to play all sorts of openings without much difficulties. Only then you can become a complete player. The general understanding is that the more openings that you play, more structures you deal with, your chess understanding will grow. That's how you become a complete player. If you guys think you have learned something useful in this video, so please like, share, and subscribe the channel. And I'll see you all in the next video then. Thank you.